Welcome back. We are in the heart of this conversation now, talking about some of the challenges that we face if we are to create the continent that we want. Well, Agenda 2063 is a map, a blueprint for us, but we all have to participate in one way or another to attaining those goals. We've heard that we need to take responsibility and start moving away from this idea of entitlement. We'll continue taking your questions now, and we start at table number 6, where we'll find Sandton.
My question is very simple. Many years ago, there was a fellow called Cecil John Rhodes. He spoke about a train between Cape to Cairo. And even today, it's still a dream. My question is it likely to happen in the near future or not? The reason I'm asking that question is purely because trade will only happen when there's ease of movement between cities. Because if there isn't any ease of travel, people tend to move into countries and stay longer, and they become squatters. And I can believe you me that nobody in his right mind wants to stay in a foreign country, because the difficulties are so much that he can't go and see his people during the times of hardships. So I just really want to know, is it something that is on the planning stages or not? Thank you.
Okay, and that's a big question, because it actually talks, each country's got its own infrastructure projects and plans. When AfriCities gets together, is there a continental-wide plan so that I can get on a train in Cape Town and go all the way to Cairo if I want to? But this, includes roads and borders and all sorts of things like that. Is this a discussion point?
Remember, our leadership on the continent has decided long ago that free movement and infrastructure to support this should be established on the continent. You remember the Lagos Plan of Action, you remember NEPAD, all of you. And this is on the agenda. The way to do it is a problem. And most of the NEPAD projects are built not as a continental project, but as an interstate projects. And this is where some of the difficulties are. We hope that this national sovereignty will be treated in a different way, so that the sense of oneness on this continent become the reality in the mindset of our leaders. For example, I'm pleading for a responsibility extended to the African Union to take charge of building continental infrastructure, and not to call on each single state to deal with the matter in its borders, within its borders. This tend to ossify these borders. You know that African borders are the most difficult borders to cross in the world. So for us, the dream of a railways from Cape to Cairo should not stay as a dream. And we think there is room for this dream to materialize if there is an authority at the continental level to take it up. And the business people are ready to partner if this capacity, institutional capacity of the AU, were established through NEPAD. But unfortunately, they didn't choose this route. And I hope with the coming together of local authorities and voicing the case of the people, down there. And this is what we are aiming at in Afri-cities, to tell local authorities to take their responsibility to also build this continent from the grassroots. And when the mayor of Nairobi and the mayor of Johannesburg meet, when the mayor of Cairo and the mayor of Lagos meet, it's through their meetings and the meetings of their people that will build this continent. It's not exclusively through the meeting of head of states.
Okay, all right. And in fact, a related question here. Partnerships, Abbas Jami, table number 1, has got an important question, I think. Is Abbas here? Ah, there we go.
Hi. Thank you. My comment, it's more of a comment in relation to private sector involvement. In order for this initiative to be successful, it requires all stakeholders to come on side. I think I represent a company called Oricon, and we're saying we want to put a challenge out to all private sector companies, specifically engineering consulting companies, to say, let's get behind this initiative. It's only going to work if all stakeholders are on side. Thank you.
Okay, so how can the private sector join this drive to grow our cities and by extension help our people? How do we do that?
Well, let me start by saying Afri-Cities is a summit, so it's not just a conference of local authorities. The conference of local authorities is but just one part of Afri-Cities. We've got sessions that deal with business. We're quite encouraged by the extent to which business has embraced Afri-Cities, both in terms of exhibitions, sponsorships, and platforms to interface with local authorities. And we're quite excited that business has taken up on the challenge to work with us to facilitate conversation between local authorities and the business community. And then I think the comment that's been made is exactly part of that conversation, to say, let us get business more involved in resolving the problems of our cities. But it's also a summit that involves non-governmental organizations, civil society. There are sessions that deal directly with ministers. We're expecting more than 100 ministers to be here to interface on issues that affect local authorities. We take advice from prominent former presidents on the African continent who, in their own rights, have become pretty much ambassadors and ex-official members, so to say, of Afri-Cities. If you think of President Thabo Mbeki, Olusegun Obasanjo, Chisano, President Perez, so those are prominent presidents that have been active on the African continent, that are providing leadership and guidance and advice on the work that they have done on the African continent, and would be sharing our experiences with them and taking forward some of the work that they have done. So we don't always see it as only a session of local authorities. We see it as a broad-based summit that involves all stakeholders. Most important, if you look at the theme, it places emphasis on people. It says that local authorities are civic bodies. These are institutions that represent people at a local level, dealing with the issues that people interface with on a daily basis. So you need to create platforms for people to be able to interface with their local authorities and with Afri-Cities. And that emphasis for us is very important. It is not just there as part of a slogan, so to say, but it is an integral part of how we're designing the summit.
All right. Councillor Manyoni, here's an interesting question, and it's for me as well. Hloni tweets saying 80% of Bloemfontein shuts down for business at 5 p.m. on weekdays and 1 p.m. at weekends. Where's business flow? It is an interesting question, because should we be thinking again about this opening and closing times if we want to get our economies going?
First, let me say, I don't know where the stats come from. But before I get there, let me quickly address the issue of the Cape to Cairo issue on trade. The AU summit that sat here in Johannesburg, the African leaders took a decision there to start looking into what they call the continental free trade area, where the SADC countries are looking into what type of an agreement they will have with their East Africa trading market counterparts. So that already is starting. Coming to the issue that we just raised, yes, it depends. Business is business. Where there is demand, there will be supply. If there is demand for business activity for a particular period, then it will basically follow and happen. It is a matter of demand and supply. Actually, I couldn't sleep well here last night. There were lots of noise until morning, so I thought, it is Johannesburg, they don't even want to sleep. Sometimes you need quality life and so on. In that regard, it is not a matter of government saying open business even if you feel that there is no demand and so forth. But it is not really true that 80% of businesses is shut at 5 p.m.
Okay.
So,
Councillor,
or maybe when the mayor goes to sleep.
Councillor Thabo, this is a question about how you involve the people on the ground and listen to their voice. Sammy Matlaila says, Peter Ndoro, the problem with African government is that they think they know what's best for their citizens. Is there a way to hear them and say, this is what we need?
There always should be a way. It's very important that you involve the people in the way in which you define your policies, set your priorities, and implement your programs, particularly at the local level. And we take very seriously the involvement of people in local governance. And our South African experience is such that there are different ways in which we try and facilitate and enable people's involvement through what committees, through participating in developing integrated development plans, community-based budgeting processes, but also mechanisms that enable representation through petitioning council, through being able to make effective representation so that the municipalities can be responsive. And I don't think that we should take it for granted. One of the things that we should continuously do is find innovative ways of facilitating that interface. And part of those interfaces have become on different platforms, different communication platforms. As cities adopt different technologies are emerging as a platform from which you're able to interact with your communities, and on the basis of that, involve them in the decisions that you make. We always say in Johannesburg, for example, when we adopted our growth and development strategy in 2011, the draft that you saw before the public comment process was significantly different from what you saw after the public participation. So the views of the people were integral in how we define the vision for the city and define the programs that need to be implemented.
All right. Just before we take another break, you mentioned technology and so on and so forth. And the concept of smart cities, I think, is an important one. We've done the M-Pesa, we've found out how to send please call me's and things like this. How does a smart city change the game for us? And what kind of things means a smart city?
And smart cities are different, mean different things to different cities. We need to develop smart cities in response to our own sort of challenges and the opportunities we're trying to create. In our cities, M-Pesa started in Nairobi, is an important innovation of a city and people that have adopted a technology. We've seen, I was talking about public participation. Tshwane has got a DG Mbizo program where they run their community participation platforms on a digital platform. In Johannesburg, we've used smart technologies to mitigate the impact of load shedding, in as much as we've adopted smart technologies to extend services that are not traditional municipal services. This would include massive open online varsity programs where you create access for young people into university, accredited programs for education, so that we're able to build a cadre of people that are able to grow our cities through gaining access to education. So smart cities always need to respond to what does it mean for you as a city and how will it help your people? But also, how do you empower your people to participate in defining your smart city solutions? We did a Hack Jozi program with Wits University where we allowed people to innovate, and we financed the innovation so that it's on the basis of people's own innovations that we're able to introduce smart technologies into our city. And I think that many local authorities on the African continent have adopted different variations to smart cities in response to their respective challenges. We shouldn't always adopt them in the way European cities. We're not Bilbao, so we're not going to find the solutions that they've introduced in Bilbao. We need to introduce solutions that deal with the issues that we confront in Johannesburg and in all the cities on the African continent.
All right. One issue that I just want us to put on the table, and I'm going to ask you, Mr. Mbassi, climate change. We're talking about it. We have meetings on it. And, you know, the guy in the street is saying, I'm just trying to survive here, man. This climate change thing, you guys can carry on with it.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, what are we doing?
But he's hit, anyway. He can say so, but he is hit. The problem is, you know, you need informed citizens. And this is where our governance is suffering, because the government, be it local or national, keep information and keep the citizen ignorant. And then they say, okay, we bring you this and that. And they don't say, you are paying this and that. Ignorance is the problem. So we need to bring information to the people. Informed people are better citizens. For example, many people don't know that this repetitive flood is the result of disturbance in greenhouse gas emission. They should know it. When they know it, then they appreciate that climate change is here, close to them, and that they should address it. And they can. 80% of greenhouse gas emissions come from cities. The change in behavior, in production and consumption, have to do with mitigating and adapting to climate change. Everybody on Earth is hit by this change. And when people will be discussing in Paris, we tend to say, oh, these are conferencing. But when they say, please curb the greenhouse gas emission, it talks to me, but I don't know it. So it is critical that people try and get educated and don't leave it. An economist was saying somewhere, economics is so important that you cannot leave it to the economics only. You need that everybody is part of it.
So, Councillor Manyoni, is this climate change agenda high enough in our municipalities and local governments across the country that it's one of the top talking points in our authorities?
As SALGA, we have been considering this matter and we are bringing it to local authorities simply because, look, the consequences of climate change are severely felt by poor people because they don't have alternatives. So in other words, people in the African continent are those who will be severely affected by climate change. You have recently seen the droughts in areas of the country, including, of course, my municipality, Bloemfontein, and so on, and KwaZulu-Natal. Whether we like it or not, it will impact on us. And we have brought to the agenda of local government that the issue of wastage and the issue of using innovative methods in terms of the built environment, recycling and so on, have to be considered. I'm happy that we just have heard from our colleague from the engineering division. We need to build partnerships that are developing the country instead of partnerships that are more based on some kind of business parasitic relationship. What can I get from business? What business can get from local government? but to develop the country and the continent and so forth. For the survival of all, particularly for poor people who don't have any other alternative, to mitigate and also to look into matters of adaptation.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to start getting into the last sort of 10, 15 minutes of our conversation. We'll take your tweets and also questions from the floor. Stay with us.